They said he was just another broken kid from the system. But when 16-year-old Ethan Rodriguez opened his mouth to sing that night, even the toughest judges couldn't hold back their tears. Ethan had spent the last 3 years moving from one foster home to another across suburban Cleveland, carrying nothing but a worn backpack and a secret that nobody knew. At Jefferson High School, he was practically a ghost. The kid who ate lunch alone in the library, who wore the same faded jeans every other day, who flinched whenever teachers called his name. His classmates saw him as just another troubled foster kid, someone to avoid, someone who didn't matter. But they had no idea what burned inside him. 3 years ago, Ethan's life had been completely different. His parents, Carlos and Maria Rodriguez, owned a small music store in downtown Cleveland called Harmony Corner. Carlos taught guitar lessons in the back room, while Maria managed the front, and their little apartment above the store was always filled with the sound of music. Ethan had grown up surrounded by melodies, learning to play piano on an old upright that his father had restored, singing along to his mother's favorite songs while she cooked dinner. Everything changed on a frigid December morning when Ethan was 13. His parents were driving to a music supplier in Akron when their car hit black ice on Interstate 77. The semi-truck couldn't stop in time. In one horrific moment, Ethan lost everything: his parents, his home, his music, his entire world. The state placed him with the Kowalski family initially. Frank and Nancy Kowalski meant well, but their cramped trailer in East Cleveland was already overflowed with their own 4 children. There was no room for music, no space for grief, no understanding of what Ethan was going through. When he tried to hum his mother's lullabies at night, Frank would bang on the thin wall and yell at him to keep quiet. After 8 months, Ethan was moved to the Brennan household in Lakewood. Patricia Brennan was a single mother working 2 jobs, barely keeping her head above water with her own teenage son, Dylan. Dylan resented having to share his room and made Ethan's life miserable, hiding his school supplies, spreading rumors that Ethan was crazy, once even flushing his father's old guitar pick down the toilet, the only physical memory Ethan had left of his parents. By the time Ethan landed with the Thompson family in Westlake, he had learned to make himself invisible. Robert and Linda Thompson were decent people who ran a strict but fair household, but they had 5 foster children rotating through their home, and individual attention was a luxury they couldn't afford. Ethan attended Jefferson High, where he quickly learned that being the new kid, the foster kid, the weird, quiet kid made him an easy target. Jake Morrison and his crew made sure Ethan knew his place. They would knock books out of his hands in the hallway, call him charity case and system rat loud enough for everyone to hear. During lunch, they would throw food at his table until he learned to eat in the library instead. The worst part wasn't the cruelty. It was the way everyone else just watched, the way teachers pretended not to notice, the way the whole world seemed to confirm what Ethan had started to believe about himself. That he didn't matter, that he was broken, that he would never be anything more than damaged goods. But in the silence of his shared bedroom at night, when his foster brother Tyler was finally asleep, Ethan would close his eyes and sing softly to himself. He would remember his mother's voice harmonizer with his on Saturday mornings, his father's gentle correction when he hit a wrong note on the piano. Music was the only place where his parents still lived, the only space where he could still feel their love. The talent show announcement appeared on the bulletin board outside the main office on a gray February morning. Jefferson High Annual Talent Showcase, Friday, March 15th. All students welcome. Sign up in the main office. Ethan stared at that paper for weeks, reading it every time he passed by, his heart racing with a mixture of terror and longing. For 3 years, he had been silent. For 3 years, he had convinced himself that the music died with his parents, that it was just another thing he had lost in the wreckage of that December morning. But seeing that announcement stirred something deep inside him, something he thought was buried forever. His foster mother, Linda, noticed him staring at the sign-up sheet one afternoon. "You thinking about entering, Ethan?" she asked gently. Linda had always been kind to him, but Ethan had learned not to get too attached. Foster placements were temporary, and hope was a luxury he couldn't afford. "I don't know," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I used to sing before." Linda's expression softened. She had read his file, knew about the accident, understood the weight he carried. Your parents will want you to share your gift, she said quietly. Music doesn't die when people leave us. It lives on through us. That night, Ethan made a decision that terrified him. He walked into Robert Thompson's study and asked to borrow the old acoustic guitar that collected dust in the corner. Robert looked surprised, but handed it over without questions. The strings were out of tune and the wood was scuffed. But when Ethan held it, he felt his father's hands guiding his own. For the next 3 weeks, Ethan practiced in secret. He would sneak out to the garage after everyone was asleep, wrapping the guitar in a blanket to muffle the sound. His fingers remembered the chords his father had taught him, and his voice, though shaky at first, began to find its strength. He chose the song carefully. Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the same song his mother used to sing to him when nightmares about the accident kept him awake. The day of the talent show arrived like a storm cloud. Ethan's hands shook as he signed his name on the participation list, and he nearly ran out of the building 3 times before the first period even started. Jake Morrison and his friends noticed him carrying the guitar case and erupted in cruel laughter. "Look at this," Jake sneered loud enough for half the hallway to hear. "The Foster freak thinks he's a musician. This is going to be hilarious." $10 says he runs off crying before he even gets to the microphone, added his friend Connor Walsh, and their laughter echoed down the corridor like broken glass. Ethan wanted to disappear. He wanted to throw the guitar in a dumpster and go back to being invisible. But then he thought about his parents, about the way his mother's eyes would light up when he sang, about how his father would beam with pride during his piano recitals. They had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. Maybe, just maybe, he owed it to them to try. The auditorium was packed that evening. Parents filled the front rows while students clustered in groups, chattering excitedly about the upcoming performances. Ethan sat in the back corner, clutching his guitar case, watching act after act take the stage. There were dancers, comedians, a group of girls who performed a choreographed routine to the latest pop song. Each act received polite applause, some more enthusiastic than others. When Principal Matthews called his name, the auditorium seemed to hold its breath. Ethan walked onto the stage feeling like he was walking to his own execution. The stage lights were blinding, and he could hear whispers and snickers from the student section. Someone called out, "This should be good," in a mocking tone, followed by more laughter. Ethan adjusted the microphone with trembling hands and sat down on the stool that had been placed center stage. He pulled the guitar from its case, and the simple act of settling it against his chest felt like coming home. The auditorium gradually quieted, but he could still feel the weight of hundreds of judgmental eyes. "This song," Ethan began, his voice barely a whisper that the microphone caught. "This song is for my parents, Carlos and Maria Rodriguez. They died 3 years ago, and they never got to hear me sing the way they taught me to sing." The auditorium fell completely silent. Even Jake Morrison stopped smirking. Ethan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first few chords of Somewhere Over the Rainbow filled the space, soft and tentative at first, then growing stronger. And then he began to sing. What came out of Ethan's mouth wasn't just a voice. It was pure emotion transformed into sound. Every note carried the weight of his loss, the depth of his love for his parents, the pain of 3 years of silence. His voice soared to the auditorium like something otherworldly, hitting notes that seemed impossible for a 16-year-old boy, weaving to the melody with maturity and soul that left everyone breathless. In the front row, Judge Patricia Williams, a local music teacher, felt tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. Judge Michael Chun, who had come expecting a typical high school talent show, found himself completely transfixed. Even Judge Sarah Thompson, known for her tough critiques, sat with her hand over her heart, overwhelmed by what she was witnessing. But it wasn't just the judges. Throughout the auditorium, the transformation was visible. Students who had been texting or whispering sat frozen, their faces slack with amazement. Parents who had come to support their own children found themselves wiping away tears for a boy they had never met. Teachers who thought they had seen everything in their careers realized they were witnessing something truly extraordinary. Jake Morrison, the boy who had tormented Ethan for months, sat in the 5th row with tears running down his cheeks, finally understanding that he had been cruel to someone who carried unimaginable pain with grace and dignity. As Ethan reached the final verse, His voice broke slightly on the words, "Dreams that you dare to dream really do come true," and in that moment of vulnerability, the entire auditorium felt his journey. The nights he had cried himself to sleep, the mornings he had wondered if life was worth living, the slow, painful process of learning to hope again. When the last note faded into silence, the auditorium remained still for what felt like an eternity. Then Patricia Williams stood up, tears streaming down her face, and began to applaud. One by one, every person in that auditorium rose to their feet, and the applause became thunderous, overwhelming, cathartic. Ethan opened his eyes to see hundreds of people on their feet, many of them crying, all of them transformed by what they had just experienced. For the first time in 3 years, he felt seen, valued, worthy of love and respect. Judge Patricia Williams took the microphone first, her voice shaking with emotion. "In 30 years of teaching music, I have never heard anything like what we just witnessed. Ethan, your voice isn't just beautiful, it's healing. You didn't just sing a song tonight. You shared your soul with all of us." Judge Michael Chin nodded, still wiping his eyes. That wasn't performance. That was pure, raw honesty transformed into art. You have a gift that the world needs to hear. But it was Judge Sarah Thompson's words that would stay with Ethan forever. "Young man, your parents may not be here physically, but they were here tonight. I felt their presence in every note you sang. They will be so incredibly proud of who you've become." The auditorium erupted again, and students who had never spoken to Ethan were suddenly surrounding him on stage, wanted to shake his hand, to tell him how much his performance had moved them. Jake Morrison pushed through the crowd, his face red with shame and tears. "Ethan," he said, his voice barely audible over the noise. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I had no idea. Man, you're incredible." In the weeks that followed, Ethan's life began to change in ways he never could have imagined. The video of his performance, posted by the school on their YouTube channel, went viral overnight. Within days, it had been viewed millions of times, shared across social media platforms, and featured on local news stations. Comments poured in from around the world. People sharing their own stories of loss, of finding hope in darkness, of being inspired by Ethan's courage. Record labels reached out. Music schools offered scholarships. A local radio station invited him to perform live on air. But more importantly, Ethan discovered that his voice had the power to heal not just himself, but others who were struggling with their own pain. He started performing at local hospitals, singing for patients who were fighting their own battles. He visited other foster homes, sharing his story with kids who felt as lost and forgotten as he once had. Each performance became an act of love, a way of honoring his parents' memory while creating something beautiful from something broken. The Thompson family, who had planned to let Ethan age out of the system like so many foster children before him, made a decision that surprised everyone, including themselves. 6 months after the talent show, Robert and Linda sat Ethan down in their living room. "We know you're 16 now, and you'll be aging out soon," Robert began, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "But we want you to know that you don't have to. We'd like to make this official, if you want. We'd like to adopt you." Linda reached over and took Ethan's hand. "You're not just a placement anymore, Ethan. You're family. You've always been family." For the first time since his parents died, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere. He felt like he had a home. 2 years later, Ethan stood on the stage of American Idol, his guitar in hand, facing judges who had seen thousands of hopeful contestants. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't singing from a place of desperation or pain. He was singing from a place of healing, of purpose, of hope. "Before I sing," Ethan told the judges, his voice steady and strong, "I want to tell you about 2 people who can't be here tonight. My birth parents, Carlos and Maria Rodriguez, died when I was 13. They taught me that music isn't just about hitting the right notes. It's about touching hearts and changing lives. Everything I am, everything I'll become, starts with what they gave me." He began to sing an original song he had written called "Somewhere You Are," a soaring ballad about love that transcends death, about finding strength in memory, about turning pain into purpose. His voice had matured over the past 2 years, becoming richer and more powerful, but it still carried that same raw honesty that had captivated his high school auditorium. By the end of the song, Judge Lionel Richie was openly weeping. Katy Perry had her hands pressed to her heart. Luke Bryan sat in stunned silence, shaking his head in amazement. "Ethan," Lionel said, his voice thick with emotion, "what you just did wasn't just singing. What you just did was ministry. You reminded every person in this building about what really matters: love, family, resilience, hope. That's not just talent. Son, that's a calling." The golden ticket to Hollywood was unanimous. But Ethan's real victory had happened years earlier, on that night at Jefferson High, when he chose to sing through his pain instead of surrendering to it. He had learned that our greatest gifts often emerge from our deepest wounds, that the very experiences that break us can become the foundation for something beautiful. Today, Ethan Rodriguez is a household name, but he never forgot where he came from. He established the Carlos and Maria Rodriguez Foundation, which provides music education and emotional support to children in foster care. He returns to Jefferson High every year to perform at their talent show, reminding new generations of students that their current circumstances don't define their future possibilities. In his acceptance speech at the Grammy Awards last year, Ethan looked directly into the camera and said something that resonated with millions of people around the world. To every kid out there who feels invisible, who feels broken, who thinks their story is over, your voice matters. Your pain has purpose. Your dreams are valid. The world is waiting to hear what only you can sing. The boy who once sat alone in school cafeterias now fills stadiums with people who find hope in his music. The kid who was dismissed as just another foster case now mentors dozens of young people who are facing their own impossible circumstances. The teenager who almost gave up on himself has become living proof that our greatest triumphs often rise from the ashes of our deepest tragedies. Ethan's story reminds us that we never know what someone is carrying, what battles they're fighting, what dreams they're nurturing in secret. The quiet kid in the corner might be the next voice that changes the world. The person everyone overlooks might be exactly the hero someone else needs to see. Sometimes our greatest gift to the world isn't our strength. It's our willingness to be vulnerable, to share our broken places, to transform our pain into something that heals others. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is exactly what Ethan did that night at Jefferson High. Step into our fear, open our hearts, and trust that our authentic voice is enough. Because somewhere in the darkness of this world, someone is waiting to hear exactly the song that only you can sing. And when you find the courage to share it, you might just discover that you're not singing alone. You're singing for everyone who has ever felt lost, everyone who has ever felt forgotten, everyone who needs to remember that they matter. Your story isn't over. Your voice hasn't been heard yet, and the world is waiting.